There's a peculiar moment that happens when the internet collectively squints at a photograph. You've probably experienced it yourself. A familiar face appears on the screen, one you've seen hundreds of times before, and yet something feels slightly different. Nothing dramatic, nothing you can quite point to, just that subtle pause where the brain whispers, "Wait a second." And lately, that exact moment has been happening across social media whenever new images of Meghan Markle begin circulating. Now here on the Crown Talk UK, we try to approach these conversations with a bit of perspective rather than pure gossip. Because interestingly, the latest debate didn't actually begin with anonymous internet speculation. It began with beauty professionals. Dermatologists, facial estheticians, and cosmetic analysts looked at recent appearances of Meghan and posed a surprisingly measured question. Not what drastic procedure happened, but rather what subtle changes might have accumulated over time. And that distinction matters because in the modern world of celebrity imagery, transformation rarely arrives with a dramatic overnight reveal. Hollywood perfected a far more delicate craft decades ago. It's the art of layering. Tiny adjustments spread across years. A touch of volume balancing here, a whisper of muscle relaxation there, perhaps a different contour technique or lighting setup. Each change individually appears almost invisible, but stacked together, they slowly reshape the way a face is perceived on camera. One thing many analysts pointed out is that Meghan's original public appeal wasn't built around a static, perfectly sculpted look. Quite the opposite. Her face was expressive, her eyes moved freely, her cheeks lifted naturally when she laughed, and her expressions carried that warm, animated quality that cameras love. Those features, the eyes, the mouth, the subtle shifts of the cheeks, are the emotional instruments of the human face. So when even minor adjustments happen in those areas, cameras notice immediately. Viewers may not know exactly what has changed, but the emotional rhythm feels different. Some observers online have described her expressions as slightly more controlled or still compared with earlier appearances. The internet, never short on dramatic phrasing, has already given the phenomenon a nickname, frozen. Though, if we're being honest, the term says more about internet theatrics than medical reality. If you enjoy thoughtful discussions like this one, rather than the usual online shouting match, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the Crown Talk UK. It helps keep this space focused on analysis rather than noise. What makes this conversation genuinely fascinating is the irony sitting quietly beneath it. Meghan built much of her public identity on being refreshingly different from the rigid beauty mold often associated with Hollywood and royal imagery. She spoke openly about authenticity, individuality, and challenging traditional expectations. Yet Hollywood, like an invisible tide, has a habit of gently pulling everyone toward the same aesthetic shoreline. Smooth skin, balanced cheekbones, calm, composed expressions. Spend enough years in front of high-definition cameras, and even the most distinctive faces begin drifting toward that polished template. Not necessarily because anyone demanded it, but because the environment quietly rewards it. And then there's the factor that almost nobody discusses enough, the technology itself. Modern cameras are ruthless. Ultra-high-definition lenses capture details the human eye would never notice in everyday conversation. Lighting setups exaggerate shadows and contours. Professional makeup techniques designed for film sets can sharpen angles dramatically under studio conditions. In other words, what might appear on screen as a significant transformation can sometimes be the result of lighting, styling, and camera optics doing most of the work. One aesthetic specialist summed it up beautifully. When the public has memorized your face, even a millimeter begins to look like a reinvention. And that, I think, is the real heart of this story. It's not necessarily that Meghan's face has changed dramatically. It's that millions of people around the world have spent years studying it. From her time on Suits to royal appearances alongside Harry Prince, her image became something almost like a visual brand. Once a face reaches that level of familiarity, even the smallest shift becomes headline material. There's also the very human element that beauty experts often mention quietly.
Life changes faces. Stress, travel, diet, sleep patterns, even emotional experiences can alter how someone looks over time, and few public figures have lived through a more intense spotlight in the past decade than Meghan Markle. Which brings us to a slightly uncomfortable but important reflection. The real question might not be what happened to Meghan's face. The real question might be why society expects famous faces to remain permanently unchanged. Because here's the truth. Time moves forward for everyone. Skin evolves, expressions soften, features shift. That's not a scandal. That's biology. Yet in the age of social media detectives and Ultra HD cameras, celebrities are often expected to exist in a strange kind of suspended animation. And perhaps that's why this debate feels so persistent. It isn't really about cosmetic tweaks or lighting tricks. It's about the collision between human change and a public that has memorized every angle of a face. So the next time the internet starts asking what happened to Meghan Markle's appearance, it might be worth pausing for